Ah,
Got it.
you get okay. So, uh, shall I just start, Daryl?
I think so. I mean, bear in mind, you told me earlier that we've got to entice people in the first 30 seconds, otherwise we're doomed.
Right.
30 seconds is
Oh
up
my
already.
goodness. I'm not stressing out. I'm cut this out anyway, Daryl. So, hello, folks. Welcome to episode 2 of Danger Mouth. Uh, and today, our subject is going to be learning because I think that's fair to say that Darrell has transitioned through many roles in his life and many industries as he spread the knowledge of how to systematically innovate, uh, and me to a lesser extent. But the key thing is, as part of this innovation journey, uh, I thought it would be a good idea to discuss our approaches to learning because they might be useful to people. And yeah, we want you to come on the journey with us. So that's enough for me. So, Darrell, what really impresses me about you is that you fearlessly go into domains that you know very little about and you start bossing them around.
That's just
So,
naivety, isn't it?
uh, yeah, well, that might be the key. So, you can riff about that, or
Yeah, that's no.
maybe, yeah.
It's fun. Yeah, we've got an occasional game that we play inside the systematic innovation team, which is you can go to any conference you like anywhere on the planet. But rule number one, it's got to be a conference subject that you know nothing about. And number two,
Yeah.
you've got to present a paper there. So that basically means you've got to get a paper accepted by a review panel. So it's got to be a refereed conference. Um, and what that effectively says is that you've got to learn to become an expert in a subject. So you've got to be able to convince people who are already experts in that domain that you know something that is worth presenting at the conference and is going to entertain and educate people there. So I think it's worked really well. I think I play it myself fairly regularly, and I've made it into an exercise that I do in some workshops where we say, okay, you're going to be an expert in a subject in the next hour. And I did it last week with a team actually. We had six teams of four. I gave them a few suggestions of areas that they could become expert in. And for the first time, all six inside the hour had demonstrated to the other five teams that yeah, they were indeed experts in this subject and yeah, had taken something which was state of the art and had moved it beyond the state of the art.
So
So,
you teach people how to bullshit then, Daryl? Is that what you're saying?
well, that is part of the story. I think being able to, I think we live in a world, as we said, I think last week, where whoever tells the best story wins. So I think that is part of the story. That's the bullshit part. But if you want to be able to sleep at night with good conscience, then I think you've got to go beyond the bullshit and say, no, this is actually beyond the state of the art. So that's, if you like, that's an unspoken part of the exercise that we do.
So,
So
what's interesting about this and that particular example is that I've always thought, because Daryl absorbs a lot of information, and the kind of joke between me and him is when I discover something new, I tell him about it, and he says, "Oh yeah, I've written a book on that, or I've written a paper, or something like that."
that's just because I'm a naive
So
person.
it would be easy to come to the conclusion that you could step in any domain and pass yourself off as an expert because you just know so much stuff. Okay. But the example you've given me is interesting because it was some poor guinea pigs that came on one of your courses that you subject this to, and you
Yeah.
gave them a pass. So what did you tell them to do?
So the if I can come back half a step very quickly. So one of my realization, I had this thought experiment probably about 20 years ago now that says, let's take all of the wise sayings in the world, let's collect them all together, and see where that takes us. Yeah. So is there a pattern behind those wise sayings? And do they lead you in a certain direction? So the conclusion, probably 15 years later, it started to emerge, is that all these wise sayings all cancel each other out. So in other words, for every statement telling you that life, it's all about the journey, somebody else will say, no, it's about the destination. So literally, they all cancel each other out. And so what you end up with in life is majority opinion. So right now, for example, should you plan or should you just dive in and do stuff? And the evidence or the advice from the Tom Peters of the world, so ready, fire, aim, is you get stuck in, you dive in and do stuff. But
Sorry, so Tom Peters is some management guru who wrote a seminal book on this, is he?
well, he wrote a series of books. Yeah, so he spent his life studying excellence.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
that was the idea. So his basic conclusion at the end of all that, it was two things really: is ready, fire, aim is a really good idea. So fire before you aim, and the other is EQ is more important than IQ, which is probably closer to some kind of reality. But ready, fire, aim, it's one of those viral things that an awful lot of leaders follow that advice. So my thinking is, well,
Sorry. Let's just slow down. So ready, fire,
fire,
aim.
aim.
So you're
So as a business,
that's counterintuitive.
it is counterintuitive, but it's one of those
Right.
things that's, I think it's a really nice phrase, 3 words, very nice phrase.
It's
And
good
the message,
bullshit. Yeah.
it's good bullshit. But I think part of the thinking behind it is that when you're operating in a complex world, there's an awful lot of stuff you can't know. So
Yeah.
really, get stuck in, and that's when you'll start finding out the reality of the situation. I think that's the way it gets interpreted. So, but I think two things come out of that. First of all, is people forget the word ready at the beginning.
Ah,
Yeah.
right. Yes.
And so that's a part of the problem. But I think even worse than that is we look at majority view rather than the real question. So if right now we live in a time in history where the majority of management advice is, Tom Peters is right, you should just dive in. The whole IT industry has kind of gone in that direction. Just dive in. Because the customer's probably stupid, can't specify what they want until you've actually given them something. But the real learning, I think, is it's not about whether one person's right or the other person's right. It's about there's a contradiction here. So sometimes the right thing to do is go quick. Sometimes the right thing to do is go slow. It's not about trying to find a position on that spectrum. It's about recognizing it's a contradiction and then saying to yourself, okay, I'm now going to solve that contradiction. So the exercise last week and the how do I become an expert in a subject is, first of all, recognize that all the domain experts in that subject are probably stuck in confirmation bias. They're all, they've got an opinion about this, the way that things work. And if you come in as the novice looking for the contradictions that they haven't recognized, then if you can now solve that contradiction, that's where you become the thought leader. So before I go to any prospective client in an industry that I've never been to before, my homework is I'm going to go and look at the contradictions that I can see they haven't solved in their industry. And the way I can do that is, if it's a technical company, I can go and look at their patents and look at the trade-offs that I can see in their patents. I can look at interviews with the CEO, for example. But I know that as soon as I can find one or two of those contradicting nuggets that they haven't thought about this, as a contradiction, then I know I've got an opportunity to, if not wow them, at least convince them, I know something about their industry and where the limits are. And then if I can do that, I've got a pretty good chance of saying, okay, well, here's my database now, which says that someone somewhere has already solved that contradiction for you. So all I was doing.
So sorry, just to elucidate your database, tell people what that is. Yeah.
So when it was smart people before us who said, if you look at things that have been successful in life, then they're people who didn't make trade-offs. So in other words, they solved the contradiction. So they started to build a database of examples of people who've were those awkward people that didn't follow the rules. They broke the rules. They find better ways of doing things. And all we've done is continued that research, looking for those situations where people break the rules and find better ways of doing things. But now you've got AI software to help with the search, then you can start accumulating literally millions of case studies of people that have seen a contradiction and said, I'm not going to do what everybody else is doing. I'm going to think about this and I'm going to find a solution which allows me to get, instead of the either or choice, I'm going to have both. Yeah, it's the classic. I want my cake and I want to eat my cake as well.
Oh, okay, so bringing us back onto the subject, because we're very good at diverting and don't really care as long as it's a good one. In terms of your specific learning when you're going into a domain or a particular company, you've got a clear objective in mind, which is to find contradictions. So that is your kind of guiding light. And then you've got some patterns you use, i.e., find patents, find these interviews.
Yeah.
But so, and it's all very interesting. I will be coming back to the contradictions and how we solve them again and again. But going back to this example of the people, so what would be an example of a domain that if you've given this exercise to me, let's say.
Okay, so there's a book came out recently. So there's another way of starting these things out. A book comes out, and the book is called Open Strategy, and it basically says if you look at what happens inside organizations when it comes to strategy, the way that's done is the senior leadership team run off into a corner, hide from everybody else, and they devise what the strategy is, and then they cascade that down the organization. So the authors
That's
of the book
happened
say,
to me many times, and they kind of do it in about half a day, usually.
So you'll like open strategy. The open strategy authors say that's completely wrong. Yeah, what you need to do with strategy is you need to do, instead of doing it top down and it's secret, it needs to be completely open and it needs to be bottom up. So you talk to people at the bottom of the organization, the one closest to the customers, and they build the strategy. So it's a really nice book, a really nice idea, because if you could say that top down, done in secret strategizing is dysfunctional, as you've experienced. I think as we've all experienced, if you've worked inside a large organization. But it's what the authors of Open Strategy have done is made another trade-off mistake. They basically said, that stuff over there is completely wrong. Let's move the pendulum over to the other side and do the complete opposite of all that stuff.
So they've gone to either end of the continuum.
Yes,
not
exactly.
explored.
Yeah. So even they are stuck in the paradigm of it's either this or it's this. So one of the exercises last week, one of the teams picked that project and said, okay, well, there's a contradiction. Yeah, it's not about is it top down or bottom up. It's not about is it in secret or is it open. It's about I want the best of both of those worlds. And as soon as they spend half an hour thinking about that, then we come back, and you've basically got the bones of a book that would say, okay, well, here's a better strategy than open strategy. Yeah, it's about combining the best of both those worlds.
Okay, that's excellent. So I'm going to now. Right. So Darrell and I were talking earlier about what is our broad strategy for these talks, and obviously the strapline is about innovation. So you've had a nice bit of innovation stuff there. But one of the other agendas is passing on the wisdom of us elders, if we've got any, which is highly debatable, onto the next generation. So, and more than ever, the coming generations are living in a world of exponential change. And it's such a blooming cliche. I've lived with that kind of cliche all my life of exponential change. And the first thing is most people don't understand it. But towards the end of my career, I've been retired for 4 years now. I was beginning to see it, and I was beginning to think, I just can't keep up. And I don't know how the people who are coming up with these technologies keep up with it. It was manifested. Cloud computing was coming in, and all the cloud computing companies had catalogs of their services, and that they were literally growing, they were growing exponentially. And
Mm.
I was aware that each one of those, if I could vaguely understand whole specialism, and they were generating them so quickly that not only did people not understand them, probably the people working on them didn't understand them, that
Yeah.
they couldn't work out how to charge for the bloody things, and the customer was having to decide whether they paid for something that they didn't understand, that they couldn't work out how much it was costing. And I just
Yeah.
thought, you're just getting too old for this, Mike. Just, you're not adding any value because you don't understand what the hell's going on. So, but that's going to get more intense. So I was just listening
Mm.
to I love Yuval Noah Harari, the author of *Sapiens*, and the thing he keeps banging on about is he says every 10 years you, you're going to have you have to change your career, and it's not kind of an accountant kind of switches into kind of maybe doing accounting software. It's like a lorry driver becomes a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
And he's saying, well, he's asking the question: are we as humans in our 40s, and our 50s, and our 60s capable of that degree of change?
Mm.
Uh, now, that's a good question. So it's so whether that's an exaggeration or whether it's not stating the case as radically as it should be stated. What? Why? Here's another example. I've been watching people, the experts who are in tune, the leaders in this technology, and one of the questions they ask, they say, "Oh, if I was my children are about to go to university, what should they learn?" And it used to be, oh, they should learn all the kind of touchy-feely human stuff because computers are never going to do that. But
Mm.
I've been looking at what some of the first applications of Chat GPT and all these deep learning networks and LLMs and stuff. And much to my surprise, it's kind of empathy bots that are kind of filling the gap in mental health provision, uh,
Yeah.
which, you know, 2 years ago, I would have said that was the last thing that was going to happen. Uh,
Mm.
so, it's another case of unexpected events. So, and Yuval was saying that in 10 years' time, they might not want yoga teachers because we're all fitted with so much biosensing technology that we'd say,
Mm.
well, we don't want to spend any more for yoga because
Yeah.
the system
Yeah.
knows our body better than anybody else. So either way, the ability to learn new stuff, I think, is going to be absolutely critical. So let's bring it down to a very arcane, very practical, simple level and say what are the kind of generic learning techniques, just very practical, how you pick up stuff.
I think the it's difficult to know where to start now. Although because my instinct is to start with the contradiction word again, but I can't do that, can I? I think um, I totally accept that speed of the world means that the truck driver may not be able to be a truck driver for too much longer. But I think what that says is that we've reached a point in history where the tide has turned, and the last century was a century of specialization, which basically said, I need lots of truck drivers, I need lots of yoga teachers, I need lots of aerodynamicists who are going to specialize, because that's what the world of employment needs right now. As soon as the AI revolution comes along, then all those vertical skills, one by one, are going to be, I think, replaced by probably in stages. So it's going to be a person with an AI next to them rather than AI replaces the person in the short term. But as the AI gets better, then it eventually does replace the humans. What the AI is really going to struggle with is connecting the dots between the verticals. So if I'm advising youngsters these days, when I'm teaching at university, for example, then what I'm always emphasising is you need to be where the world is right now. You need to be the horizontal person, the person that can be the generalist, if you like, to put it in those rude terms relative to specialist. But it's the person that can connect the dots between the different domains. So you can go to any industry, and as we were describing at the beginning of this conversation, you can convince the people in that industry that you know something about it, even though you've only spent an hour studying it. It's the dot connector. It's the person that can connect the similarities between being a yoga teacher and being an aerodynamicist, for example, or the truck driver. And
Which might not be as crazy as it sounds, because it sounds
I don't
crazy.
think it is. I think, coming
Yeah.
back to our database, I think, that database essentially says that we're all working on the same basic problems in life, and we all eventually come up with the same solutions. And all we're doing is just codifying that, and taking an enormous funnel and distilling millions and millions of case studies down to there's probably only a couple of hundred problems in the world.
Well, actually, one of Darrell's maxims is that if you've got a problem, once you've identified the problem you want to solve and potential type of solutions to it, you go off and find somebody else who's had that problem for a long time, maybe, and because of their environment, they haven't been able to live with that contradiction. They've had to go and solve it, and
So think of somebody with a more extreme version of your problem, and they've had to solve it.
So the example we came across today was an article where this lady had studied animal trainers of exotic animals, and she found their wisdom and transferred it into training a husband, which I think is a very good example. Because if you've got a kind of who has trouble taming dumb beasts, animal trainers.
Yes, perfect.
So,
Yeah, I mean, find somebody with a 10 times version of your problem, then they've had to do something to fix that problem.
so okay, so if we accept that, and it's going to be hard for people because the whole education establishment is split into verticals.
Yes. Yeah.
And and that trend is increasing because people are looking for the little niche where they can earn a fortune because no one else is doing it. Well, I found out the other day that when they're training AI models, I think that's called hyperparameters, which is basically how many levels they have and how fast it ticks over and all this sort of thing. Apparently, it's not a science at all, and other AIs can't do it. So if you know how to tune it, it's like tuning a car. you could, if it's 100 levels, you can earn £100,000, and if it's double that, you can earn 1 million or something. But the trouble is, you don't want to advise your grandchild or whatever to do that, because sure as eggs are eggs, in 5 years' time or whenever, that will have gone. And you're thinking, is it transferable? I think that's quite a good question. Is that knowledge transferable? Well, it might be, but it's not particularly awesome.
I think it's. I mean, one of the books I'm trying to finish at the moment is this book of First Principles, which says, okay, what's that universal knowledge that's always true, or maybe not quite always, because scientific knowledge expands, and so facts have got a half-life. But if you look at the world from a principle perspective, you can be pretty certain that you've got an orders of magnitude greater stability than if you look at, I don't know, an engineering textbook, for example, or a book about how to code software, which is going to go out of date in 2 or 3 years time. So I think looking at life from a principles level gives you a much better handle on things. And I think one of my big criticisms of the education sector, because I completely agree with you that the education system is still absolutely stuck in that teaching verticals, and even the university that say no, we teach cross curriculum. And the reality is that's not happening at all. I mean, when I worked at a university in this country for a while, the dean of the engineering school basically said, "All right, okay, we're all mechanicals, electricals, civils, right? We're all going to be one faculty now." And all of the mechanicals looked at the electricals, looked at the civils, and we all said, "I've got no idea what you do over there, and I've got no interest either." So,
Right, you're all in the little
so
tribes, yeah.
yeah, so I think humans like tribes. We like to stay inside our comfort zone. So even though the intention was good of okay, well, go and talk to those civil engineers over there and see what you can learn from them. The reality is we're all too busy, and we all love to stay inside comfort zones. So I think again, I think the future advice is the person who can connect the civils and the mechanicals, or whatever two disciplines together, is the person who's going to be the successful person.
So what you're saying, Darrell, is everybody should learn general studies.
I think that I did general studies um, as a
Sorry,
actually.
I'm just smiling now because that was a provocative statement.
I think well again I think even general studies was taught as a vertical if that's possible when I did it.
Well,
Um,
it was kind of essay writing, wasn't it? So here lies an interesting point. Okay, so let's go with you need what's the word? You need an eclectic knowledge set rather than a
yeah,
so the trouble is, I think what you're now saying is what you don't want is a little sample of each area. What you
correct.
really want to
Yeah,
do is to learn the fundamentals of that area. So let's put you in a happy place, Darrell. Let's talk about music, okay?
yes,
So rather than doing a course on garage rap or something, whatever it is, which there's nothing wrong with that. It'd be very interesting, and you'll get a bit of flavour of some of the fundamentals of music. So you tell me the fundamentals of music, what you should learn if you were doing music as part of your, what's the word for somebody who knows lots of stuff? Can't remember it now.
a Renaissance person or a generalist, somebody who's eclectic.
Yeah. There's a better word than that. But anyway, so riff on music, Darrell, because you can go all day on
Well, it's ironically all the things I talk to clients about in terms of mastery. I often talk about how I've failed to master playing guitar, and I think the reason for that is that I'm um, very prone to stay inside my comfort zone rather than push towards the limits of things and run towards the difficult stuff. But I think if I was, I've sponsored music PhDs. How about that? So I've asked other people to study things, and I've been the person who's come along with a very partial knowledge of music. So um, yeah, scales and stuff like that. I think those are some of the fundamentals that you just need that stuff. But if we're going to innovate in music, and I think music is ripe for innovation right now because everything increasingly sounds the same because we're all using the same software
that. Yeah.
to create and produce things. What the Max Martin School basically says, right, we're now going to have specialists who can write the pre-chorus. Yeah, so I don't even get to write a song myself now. I get to write the pre-chorus for the songs because in the
Okay.
past I've been good at that. Um,
Yeah.
I think again it comes back to okay, well, what music needs right now is the person who can come along and break the rules and find better rules.
Right, but do you need to learn the rules in the first place? Do you need to,
I think it's helpful to know the rules, the principles. So here's my scales. I need to know that stuff in order to be able to say, okay, well, is there a better way of doing things? Yeah, I mean, you could get right down to first principles and say, okay, well, we live in the West at least with a 12 note um, octave.
yeah.
Um, um, but if I wanted to innovate, we now analysed all the combinations. You've seen a lot of those combinations. There was a paper I saw last year where a piece of AI has been used to effectively compose billions and billions of combinations of notes, which says effectively, okay, well, nobody can copyright anything now because all the combinations of notes have been uh, uh, created. Then what do I do as an innovator in that world? I say, okay, well, I need to move away from a 12-note octave then. I
Which,
need
right,
which
okay.
of
There
course,
was kind
you
of
look at.
all the atonal stuff, but I suppose that was still 12 note, wasn't it? It was just getting away from
Yeah, I
the
mean, so
scale.
I think
Yeah.
some of the Indian music is 16 note, and I think people like Harry Page, looked at microtones and things like that. So I think there have been pioneers, but I don't think they've got through that inevitable first fuzzy stage where people listen to it and say, "God, that's weird, isn't it?" And got past that. So Harry Page, microtones, almost nobody's heard of those. But
Okay,
there's
so I think Darrell and I like to kid ourselves we're all breakers, but I equally like making them. So one of our rules is that we won't let Darrell go on about music for more than 5 minutes because we
I
want
didn't
to
even give you the
have.
punchline.
Oh, you're still going on. Oh, sorry, I've gone to sleep
I
then.
was one line away from the
Go
punchline. The
on,
punchline
do it then.
the
Go on, do
punchline
it.
is nobody's heard of Harry Page, but Paul Simon's last album, but one, was a very popular album which used an awful lot of that microtone in what it did. But so it needs the pioneer. It also then needs the person who can popularize the
Connected
ideas
to
and
people. Yeah, yeah,
connect
yeah,
it to
yeah.
people.
Yes, because because
People love
you've got to look
familiar.
at the function. You've got to look at the function of music, and
I think as an
yeah.
innovator, as a rule breaker, I think so breaking the rules is one part of the job, but innovation, I think, is you've got to break the rules, but you've also got to connect back to the familiar. So
Yes,
the customer needs to feel like, oh, okay, I recognise that thing, that bit's familiar to me, but then you've stretched it in some direction, and that's the novelty that you've given people. But you've tapped, so therefore you've solved the contradiction of novelty and familiarity.
but that also brings it back to your another one of your maxims, which is that 98% of good ideas are a waste of time because they actually fail.
Yeah, that's
So
research.
so that's based on real data.
Yeah,
So I'm thinking of kind of all the so it's easy to come up ideas that kind of lead nowhere. In other words,
yeah,
and for me, a lot of the kind of the atonal experiment that was I don't know, it's happening round about pre and post World War II was it was just so intellectually on intellectual level, people thought this is good, this is innovative, but the actual audience that could connect to it was minuscule, and it kind of gave classical music a really bad name, I think,
yeah.
and it's
I agree. I
still
mean,
recovering from that.
if I can give you a modern example, I think I mean,
You've got
I
me back
was.
onto music, you bastard.
That's you're not escaping now. We're gonna have another mini story about innovation in music. So I mean, you and I are both of an age. I'm not sure whether you were a punk or not, but I really.
I was into soft cell or whatever that was,
Oh my goodness me,
new romantic or whatever.
you
I
need to
don't
edit that bit out because that's going to really
know.
that's going to kill us. That is. So I think I was a punk, but when I look at the majority of punk music now, am I going to play it? I don't think so. So it was great that
No,
it broke all the rules. Um, but again, back to this idea of innovation as familiar plus novelty. It's only when bands like Blondie come along, yeah, punk band, CBGBs, all that, and then say, "Oh no, we're going to sell lots of records. So we're going to go and work with Mike Chapman, for example, knows how to make a commercial record. We're going to combine the best of both worlds. They're the ones that make the money. They're the innovators, actually,
right.
not
Okay,
the
so
Sex Pistols.
coming away from music and talking about this kind of generalist education, I think the one thing that's become evident to me is that if you wanted to design the the perfect course for this kind of joining the dots type person.
Yeah.
The new Renaissance man. It's not very obvious what you teach people, and is there anybody looking at that as in terms of a
Well, we have. So I've got a series of articles planned. I've written two of them and published two of them. So one is I've called it minimum viable researcher. So if I was going to go into a career in research, what are the things that I need to understand? And the other one I've done for some bizarre reason was minimum viable politician, probably because I look at that world and say if ever there's a domain that needs some horizontal thinking, it's politics. So
well, that's certainly a domain where the bullshit is kind of everything,
I think
and
so.
that hasn't
Yeah,
worked out
yeah,
very well, has it? It hasn't worked
yeah.
out. It's
I don't.
yeah,
No, again, I think it's a phase in history. So I think that that idea of a minimum viable anything. Yeah, I've got several other titles planned in the series. So minimum viable lecturer, minimum viable, yeah, accountant, etc., etc. Basically rethinking what the world looks like when there's pervasive AI and when we need the humans to be the dot connectors, across the domains. That's the AI won't be able to do that. I won't have the
so
wisdom to do that.
is there anyone else that you know of in the entire planet that's doing anything remotely like this?
I don't think there is. I mean, we look, and I think you can see an occasional sign. I think you can see an occasional individual that is I'll say a natural dot connector. But I think if you say I need two things from this way of looking at the world, I need the dot connector, number one, that can recognize this is similar to this. But the piece that's is even rarer is, sorry to use the word again, is the contradiction finder
Yeah,
solver.
yeah.
And if you can combine both of those things together, then that's when you've really got something. So one of my big frustrations in life is that all the quiz stuff about finding contradictions, solving contradictions, hasn't gone viral, and it's turned into this horrible, slightly weird clique.
Yeah. So the interesting thing that's just popped into my head is that in the world of AI, where they've been incredibly successful at building AI models that are spectacularly good in very narrow verticals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as they push towards the goal of AGI, general intelligence, a lot of the effort is going into literally into joining the dots, into transferable
Mm.
models, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting, that analogy, because AI, an AI model in itself has the capability of being much more powerful than a human, in
Yeah.
terms of scale, if you like.
Yeah.
So it's almost like by accident we're in the
Mm.
in the
I,
non-human world of AI. They're trying to do exactly the same project.
yes. So I think the fundamental problem comparing those very specialized AIs working in a vertical is that within the vertical, you've got thousands and thousands of specialists that you can use to train the system in the first place, and
Yeah.
then validate the system. So when you
But they can
say, okay,
harvest the existing knowledge, in other words.
exactly, yeah. So with radiography, finding cancer cells in an X-ray, once you caught the AI, this is a cancer cell, then the AI is going to do that way better than the specialist is going to do it, because humans make mistakes and humans
Yeah.
miss things. But as soon as you say, okay, well, I'm now going to make an AGI and it's going to connect the dots across the domains, there's no human that can validate the system. You can't train it because no human can do it.
Yeah. Well, yes, yeah. By the current techniques, no.
Well, I mean, there is no human expertise for connecting the dots. Yeah, yeah, other than within very limited areas. We're all trained in verticals. So it sounds a little bit weird to say it, but when it comes to this horizontal wisdom, so who's going to train the AGI? Then it's unfortunately people like myself that have had the good fortune to work across lots of different domains, and it's people like the TRIS community that has also had to study across different domains. So the thought of the AGI has been trained with people like that is kind of worrying to some extent. But where else do you go? Because connecting the dots and saying, this is the right way of connecting these horizontal dots. There's very few people that can, with any kind of authority or validity, say those things.
Right, that is quite deep, and I'm in trouble taking that in. But
that's the meaning
I
of life.
think
That's the way to end this. That's the way to end the podcast.
I think we are near the end. I just want to ask you one question first.
Go on.
So all those articles, your minimum this and minimum that, is that all based on your minimal viable system, your 6 boxes?
I've tried to stay away from being explicitly in that area, but it's certainly informed things. So I think I remember the minimum viable politician one. Yes, it's like, okay, if I'm going to put somebody on a 1-year master's degree course to become an acceptable candidate, then this is what they're going to learn in the 1 year. That minimum viable system is going to be part of that, but I've not been explicit about it. I'm sure it would be a part of the curriculum itself.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. So just for everybody who's wondering what on earth you're talking about, Darrell's got this. Well, don't even explain it. We're going to start there. This minimum viable system's got 6 boxes all plugged together. And they're very important. So maybe we'll have a future session on that, because I still haven't quite got my head around it. So
no, I've noticed that you haven't got your head around it because you've been accusing me of making it all
making
up.
Stuff. Yeah. Well, I'm pretty certain of that, actually, but we shall see.
You can test me on it on episode 3 or 4. How about
that? Okay, so this is the end of another show. Thank you very much, Darrell. We've done a very good job of steering away from the subject once again, so congratulations on that.
We haven't quite got to the meaning of life, you mean? Are you trying to tell me that we have not conveyed to people the meaning of life in this episode?
We'll work it on it. So bye for now, folks.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Aaron. See ya.
Let's stop the recording. Stop the recording. Oh God, where's it gone? I hope it was recording. Well, it said it, didn't it? Oh, there it goes. There it goes.
Yeah, we did.
So that was quite good, wasn't it?